Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, June 23, 2023. IRS agents backdate documents filed with a court, and that's a felony. Now, we know that there are two types of people who dislike the IRS and the income payroll tax system, men and women. We all know that there has to be a better way to fund the federal government, and a growing number of Americans agree that that better way is the FAIRtax. However, until we replace the corrupt and broken income payroll tax system with the FAIRtax, Americans have a right to expect that the IRS and its employees will be held to the same legal and ethical standards that they enforce on the rest of us. However, a recent case indicates that the IRS seems to believe that it could ignore laws that get in its way. The case reported in the June 5, 2023 Political Weekly Tax is about the IRS backdating documents. Now, backdating is when you sign and date a legal document to make it look like you signed it earlier than you actually did. For example, if you actually sign your income tax return on May 15, 2023, but you date your return indicating that you signed it on April 15, 2023, so you can avoid late filing penalties, that's backdating, and it's illegal. In fact, it's a felony. Now, here's some of the key points in this case. Lake Point Land Group is a partnership that claimed tax breaks for land conservation deals, a benefit provided by the Internal Revenue Code. Now, land conservation is where taxpayers purchase a property and then donate it to a nonprofit that will conserve it. In that case, the donor receives a tax deduction for the donation. The IRS assessed penalties of $38 million in unapproved partnership deductions for the donation of land to a nonprofit because they believed the land was valued improperly. Lake Point refused to accept the penalty assessment and brought the matter to the U.S. Tax Court. Lake Point was presented with a document allegedly signed in July of 2016 by an IRS supervisor. That document was required in order for the IRS to assess the penalties against Lake Point. Lake Point attorneys discovered that that was a lie. The supervisor actually signed the document in February of 2017, but dated it as if he had signed it in July of 2016, backdating the document. Now, even though the Lake Point attorneys informed the IRS attorneys about the backdating, attorneys for the IRS still failed to notify the tax court of the backdating. The IRS then doubled down and submitted sworn declarations to the tax court that there had been no backdating. In an April motion with the tax court, the IRS finally admitted to the error but said it was unintentional, adding, quote, "The commissioner expresses his contrition and apologizes to the court and to the petitioner for this error," end of quote. Now, it's clear that signing a fraudulent document as part of an audit by anyone in the government is no joke. It constitutes a felony. In conclusion, how can deliberately backdating a legal document in an effort to deceive a court be unintentional? Claiming that the backdating was an unintentional error was clearly an attempt by IRS attorneys to shield IRS employees from criminal prosecution because you must have intent to commit an act that breaks the law. Are the attorneys saying that the IRS employees were too stupid to understand that their actions were wrong and that they had no intent to break the law? If the employees truly are that stupid, then how can they be trusted to audit U.S. taxpayers? Can you imagine what a judge would do to any of us if we admitted that we falsified the date we signed a critical document in an effort to mislead that court? That's a crime. Again, a felony. The judge would ask the criminal authorities to prosecute us, and if we were employed by a responsible employer, not the government, we'd be fired. However, it appears that the standards that would apply to you and me don't apply to IRS employees, because so far, no one in this case has been terminated or referred to the authorities for prosecution. How much longer will the D.C. establishment ignore the obvious? The income payroll tax system and the IRS are broken and can't be fixed. How much longer will we tolerate the D.C. establishment's refusal to do the right thing because of their greed and desperate desire to control us? How much longer will Americans tolerate not knowing the true cost of the federal government that the income payroll tax system hides and that the FAIRtax shows on every retail receipt? Congress and D.C. know that there's a better alternative, the FAIRtax. Instead of spending time doing endless hours of paperwork that don't create anything of value to yourself, your family, or the nation, why not eliminate the unnecessary waste? Now, many in D.C. oppose the FAIRtax because it would transfer power from the government to the people while at the same time giving the people a better chance of succeeding on their own. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system and the IRS along with it? When the FAIRtax is enacted, there will be no need to fear being audited by the IRS because there will be no more IRS. Under the FAIRtax, there will be no more tax returns. We'll pay our federal taxes when we make retail purchases of new goods and services. Now, there's going to be a vote on the FAIRtax in the House of Representatives. Speaker McCarthy and the other elites didn't want it, but it was forced on them. So we now have the opportunity to force all members of the House to show where they stand. They can vote for the present income payroll tax system, or they can vote for the FAIRtax. They can support the corrupt income tax and the IRS, or they can vote to eliminate them. It can't be any simpler than that. They can hide the true cost of government, or they can pass the FAIRtax and show everyone the true cost of government on every retail receipt. And finally, they can support the largest transfer of power from the government to the people, the FAIRtax, or they can vote against it. Now, if members think the FAIRtax needs to be changed, then they can propose that change. Don't let them get away with rejecting the entire bill because it has a flaw that can be easily addressed. Please stand with us and demand that your representatives support a much fairer, much simpler, and much more efficient way to fund the government, the FAIRtax. With the FAIRtax, there are no tax returns to file, no records to keep. We pay our federal taxes when we make retail purchases of new goods and services. And with the FAIRtax, there is no need for the IRS. If you sell a used couch or a used jet ski online, there is no FAIRtax due on that transaction. The FAIRtax will allow us to take back control. The income payroll tax system is broken. It's no longer working. We can't repair it, but we can replace it with the FAIRtax. Join us and take back control of our country and our lives, not with bullets, but with the elimination of one of the biggest threats to our liberty and economic prosperity, the income payroll tax. We should all remember Edmund Burke's warning that applies to our efforts to take back control. Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. We should also remember this quote from George Orwell's 1984, which, if we do nothing, may foretell your and your children's future. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. So what can each of us do? We can write letters and make calls to our elected representatives and attend Zoom town hall meetings demanding that if they really want to allow Americans to take back control, the first step is to eliminate the income payroll tax system and enact the FAIRtax. Take back control. Help us pass the FAIRtax. Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing or investing $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to fairtax.org and invest in AFFT. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the FAIRtax, and learn why the FAIRtax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org.